I'm Lori Woolery, director of The River Bride.
I'm Marisela Treviño Horta. I'm the playwright of The River Bride.
Let's talk about The River Bride. Another world premiere play by Marisela Treviño Horta. All right, Marisela, shall we start from the very beginning?
What would you like to know?
How did this play come to you?
Well, so this play is part of a cycle of plays that I'm currently working on that I call Grim Latino Fairy Tales. I actually wanted to write mythology, like plays that were myths, because I love Greek mythology. I grew up with it, and I love astronomy, and there's a lot of Greek mythology tied to that. So I started writing a play, and I was like, I'm writing a myth, and it just didn't feel right. It just wasn't clicking, and I ended up watching. Jim Henson did a bunch of fairy tales. The Storyteller, and I was watching it on Netflix, and I was watching just one of these fairy tales, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm writing a fairy tale. That's what's going on. And it helped make sense of what I was doing. And that first play, it's still in development, because The River Bride is actually the second play in that cycle. And the reason why I was able to kind of write The River Bride is because I had fairy tales on my mind. So I wanted them to be inspired by Latino folklore or mythology, but I also wanted to incorporate what I grew up with, which was, the European canon of fairy tales, just that structure of what a fairy tale is. And of course, I grew up with a lot of Disney fairy tales, which are very sanitized and very happy ending with bows at the end. And then as I grew up and got a little older, I ran into the Brothers Grimm, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are really dark and scary and violent. And it became very clear that those stories were written to help children navigate a very dark and dangerous world. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to write fairy tales, and I'm going to write them. I'm looking for. I had one that I was working on, and I decided I wanted to do a cycle. I used to be a poet, and poets love things in threes. So I was like, I want 2 more ideas. I was looking for another idea, and I love this one show called River Monsters. I don't know if anybody watches this show. It's about a guy who fishes. And it's got a very scientific approach to it, and I grew up with a lot of science in my life, so I like that. And they were doing a marathon. I also have a crush on the guys. Anyways, they had a marathon of the show, and I was doing laundry, and because it was a marathon and they were all old episodes, they were trying to make it interesting for the viewers by splashing trivia at the bottom of the screen. So we were watching, I was watching the episode set in the Amazon. It was about piranhas. And he's like, there's one thing in the river that piranhas fear, and I was like, oh, what's that? And he's feeding something you can't see because it's really murky, the water, and you just see something eating the fish that he's throwing and tossing in, and then he of course gets in, and the music's really like, oh, dangerous, and then the camera goes underwater, and he's feeding dolphins, and you learn that there's dolphins that live in the Amazon, freshwater dolphins, and that's when I happened to look up from doing my laundry, and the trivia that splashed across the screen was, in the Amazon folklore says that blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the inspiration for the play. So I don't know, are we trying not to give,
Well, just know that there is a body of folklore around pink river dolphins in the Amazon. And if you want to learn more, you can Google it, or you can just be surprised by the play.
Yeah, you can be surprised by the play. So that's where the inspiration came. And while I was writing, when I began writing The River Bride, it felt like a return to my roots as a poet. Most of my poetics are in a lot of my other playwriting. It's imagery, lyricism, attention to word choice, things like that. But with The River Bride, it felt so much more elevated. They were speaking so formally. I found it really curious. I was like, why are my characters talking like this? I was like, I don't know, we're just going to let it fly. And when I began writing the play, it was about the younger sister. And as I began writing more of the play, the older sister was so much more interesting to me, and everything shifted. And so then what else to say about it? I don't know, that's it. Let Lori talk, she's our director.
Absolutely. So Lori, there's an evocative delicacy in the experience of reading The River Bride, the language that Marisela alludes to, the poet's preciseness in even the naming of the characters. The characters' names are symbolic and significant of the place that they occupy in this story. So I'm curious, when you started working with Marisela on this project, what were the guideposts that you set for yourself as a director in bringing the story to life on stage? There are spectacular moments that happen in the story. How do we solve that on a Bomer stage as part of a rotating rep season?
Well, first of all, don't screw it up was like the first thing that came to my mind. This was a matchmaking by Bill Rausch. He called me up and said, I have this amazing play. I think you would be great in it. Would you read it? Tell me if you're interested, and then I can broker a conversation with you and Marisela. So I received the play, and on the cover of the script is this image. And it's of a woman, it's our poster. So if you've seen it around town, it's the poster of the woman submerged in water and wearing a white gown, and you can't really see her head, but it's taken from underneath. And where I was at in my life, I had had that same exact image sitting on my desk, just because images speak to me as an artist and as a human being, and so I just collect them. But that particular one was really kind of representative of how I was feeling and where I was at in my life. And so when I got the script and it was the exact same image, I was like, mind meld, like I've got to direct this play. I just felt it intuitively. And as an artist, I'm an intuitive artist, so I tend to, I can start looping in my head and overthink things, so I try to just work from gut as much as possible. And when I read the play, I loved it. I was going through a very complicated relationship, on again, off again, on again, off again, you know. It's a play about love for me. It's a play about how to be courageous in love. And often times when you fall in love and your heart is broken, what you do is you protect it. And so you think that you can't survive another heartbreak like that. And then what ends up happening is you miss the opportunity for more love to enter your life. So that's where I was at in my life as I was reading this play. So to me, it became a cautionary tale for adults about loving fiercely and being brave and emotionally risking. I think that we can often do that in our lives and not do that with our hearts. So I immediately wanted to direct the play and was praying that the playwright would like me and say yes. And also, you know, we spoke and we felt like we were on the same page, and I love doing new work. I really feel like my job as the director is to serve the playwright and serve the play. And oftentimes as new plays are being developed, is the idea lives in the playwright's head, and it's my job to try to get in there and understand the choices that they are making and see if I can theatricalize that. And there have been times along the process that we don't always agree, but I will always try to the best of my ability to see if we can make that work. And with the amazing actors that we have in this company, just helping us figure out what sounds right. Because, you know, as Marisela was saying, she's a playwright, and she's a poet first and foremost. And something that we shared together was this quote by Lorca.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try to quote it because I screwed it up there.
No, I know what it is.
The quote from Lorca is,
"A play is a poem standing up."
and so that kind of became, you know, like where we met was trying to see how best we could put this poem up on its feet. And so that's what you're going to be witnessing, is this experiment and this attempt at capturing different facets of love and how love can be not the pretty bow on the end, but how love is complicated and brutal and savage and lovely and tender and delicate. So as I was navigating bringing this up on its feet, to me it was about the muscular fragility of the play is what I just kept coming back up to me. So I feel like the scenic design represents that. My designers are just a fierce group of artists who are so passionate and so willing to ask hard questions, and we discuss and we argue in all the best of ways that you want rigorous art making to happen. And I feel like Marisela and I have had that same relationship in the room. And there are surprises, so I don't want to be all like, I'm withholding, but sometimes love is about withholding, right, my friends? So,
You made a good point that I want to go back to. I forgot to say this. When I said I wanted to write fairy tales, sometimes people think fairy tales, that's a play for children. And for me, these are fairy tales for adults, that this is about navigating our adult emotional lives, the stories that I'm working on. Because the next one in the cycle is about an abusive relationship, so it's definitely not for kids. So.
yeah, and also, the entire design team, something that we really, we wanted to get as many Latinos in. The entire cast is these amazing Latino artists here in Ashland, a few from outside, designers as well. We wanted to bring that into the creation of this play, but we also really wanted to make sure it was not a tourism piece, so that people are coming to see, a play about people on the Amazon. It's about people who love each other, who live together, who misunderstand, miscommunicate one another. So our hope is that it really does have a universal reach, and that both, young teenagers and people young at heart, no matter what your age, you can relate to these characters. We wanted to make them very human, very real, very grounded. So we made choices in the acting being very, very real, although the language is very, very heightened. And sometimes that works beautifully, and sometimes we're discovering where we have to work extra hard to make all those aspects live together. But I think Marisela working here at the Shakespeare Festival is just such a beautiful gesture and advocacy of a young playwright who is language-based, being in a theater that is language-based. And I'm just really excited to share it with you all, and love to hear your thoughts. It's a new piece, it's in process, so let us know what you think.
Thank you.